Welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show. My name is Mike Hewitt, and my guest today is Jim Riley. Jim, welcome back.
Well, thank you. It's great to be back. It's been a while.
I think it was December, January, somewhere in there.
I don't know. You've changed the name of your show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't lose any weight or nothing, though. Not that much has changed.
Well, it's good to be back, and it's good to see your show continuing on. It's a great one.
I got to tell you, I'm having a lot of fun with it, but thank you for saying that. Hey, before we dive into a bunch of news, Jim, let's just get this thing for you and me right out of the way here now. Folks, just so you understand, I get a phone call from Mr. Riley that says he's got a bone to pick with me, and so we got him back on here. Jim, pick the bone.
Well, it's not a bone, more like maybe a hatchet. But no, I was listening to your show last week.
Thank
Good
you.
show
I appreciate
again.
that.
And I'll just give a plug for the show because I think one of the great benefits that you bring to your listeners and those who watch your show on either on TV, on Comcast on Mondays, or on the web, is an opportunity to hear candidates being interviewed by someone who's a pretty good interviewer prior to the elections, and then giving you an opportunity to the voter an opportunity to do further research. And so many times we hear people say, "Oh, I didn't know they were that, they had those views or these views or what have you." And in good measure, because the newspapers and the other media don't cover these folks, and in fact, you do. So I think that's a real plus. That's why I was listening.
I appreciate you saying that, Jim, but you know what the fun part will be? Is that those candidates that get elected, and then when they start acting as legislators and they find that the caucus or the pressure of lobbyists or whatever move them in a different position, then I get them back on and say, no, wait a minute, you said whatever it is I said as a candidate.
Ooh, and you've got it on audio and
video. I got it
video.
on audio. I'll be saying, Oscar, play clip 1. Didn't he say X, Y, Z, and yet he didn't do anything that looks like that? That's the fun part.
Well, good. Well, anyway, so I was listening to the show to try to help my knowledge base when it comes to voting.
So speaking of calling someone on something that they said.
And you had made a comment, which was you were recounting some information that I had said to many, many folks, in that when I found out that my health care plan, which I'd had for almost 6 years with Blue Cross, was going to be canceled because of Obamacare.
That was because it was inferior.
It was a substandard policy,
according substandard Blue Cross policy
to the President of the United States.
Yeah.
So I had to go search, and as ad nauseum, we've talked about my trek through the internet, trying from October 1st on to get through to Obamacare, and finally, and in the last few days, actually it was less than a week to go in December, I was finally able to get through and get connected with an Obamacare plan. Now, I had a variety of choices. In fact, there were a total of 31 choices available in Michigan for someone like myself, and I don't know if that was the total that Michigan had available, or it was just for single old men soon to die.
This is 31 that were listed on the Obamacare
on the website. Yes, okay. There were 31 choices that private you could choices? Have made. No, these are the Obamacare exchanges. Okay. These were different policies offered by a total of 3 companies. Blue Cross was one of those companies, but 3 companies in total offering a total of 31 plans that you could choose from. And you were making fun of me because I had said that I had taken a low-cost policy, which was, in my case, because it was subsidized by the youths of America. Thank you very much, by the way. Give them all a little hug for me, because my monthly premium, which should have been in the neighborhood of $700 a month for this particular policy, was subsidized because I have a low income to the tune of over $600, so that my net cost was $16.50 a month. Now, in exchange for that, I also had to get a very high deductible, which was $4,500 deductible, which seemed to me to be a pretty good deal. In good measure, because I've not had health problems of any note in the past, and I am going to be hitting 65 and going on Medicare-free government health care. Thank you, younger generation, again, for picking up the tabs on that, since most older folks on Medicare use up their lifetime contribution in the first year. But my Medicare kicks in at the end of June, so that I said, well, my golly, this makes sense. Consumers make calculations when they have to make purchasing decisions. We don't always buy the least expensive, the cheapest, whatever it is, a can of soup, be it a car. You go out to Myers and you're looking for a rake to rake your lawn. In the spring, you don't always buy the cheapest rake. You buy the cheapest rake. You pay the least amount of money for the rake that you feel will satisfy the particular job. And if it's the soup or, again, you name what it is, that's what we do in America. We shop around, and we try to find the product that will satisfy our need and then pay the least amount for it. I might see something that I like at Myers at $10 and say, I think I'm just going to go across the street over at Walmart and see if they have something similar. And if it's less expensive, of course, I'll buy it at the less expensive place. So that's what I did. I made that calculation that every American who was forced into Obamacare had to make. They had to make the decision of what the deductible would be and what would be covered, and if, in fact, they even wanted to be forced into the Obamacare exchanges, because there was an alternative, and that is, at least this year, to pay $100 penalty, I guess, and not get insurance. Now I'm being mocked here. Okay, make the long and short of it is, you guys were making fun of me because...
You've never made anything the long and short of it, okay?
21 days into my a ski vacation, 21 days into this year, I fell on a ski vacation, folks, and broke a rib.
This is the fun part, folks.
Okay. Well, it was fun for the people who perhaps in the medical community, but it wasn't for me. So I broke a rib.
Yep. And
so I did have to go to the emergency room. And you folks were making fun of me, saying, he took the cheap plan with the big deductible and ended up net losing money in the plan. As it turned out, I actually ended up making a little bit of net less expense. But the point is that when the government steps in and tells you this is what you must have or must not have in health insurance, for instance, and reduces the choices that we have available to us, and then really, in a very perverse way, screws everything up by giving some people extra money to make their purchases. In other words, giving them subsidies in the purchasing of their insurance. You end up people making choices that at first may very well seem to make sense, or in many cases may make no sense at all. For instance, by making normal health insurance significantly more expensive this year under Obamacare as opposed to last year. The studies have said that in Michigan, for instance, the average insurance cost is up 118%. In other words, double plus 18%. People are going to make those human calculations and say, you know what, I'm not going to pay my insurance anymore now that it's gone up so much. I'm going to pay the $100. Or I may get this very, very huge deductible plan and just hope I don't have to use it. I'm
thinking, folks, that I'm talking to an elected official. If I close my eyes and it's not Jim Riley, it feels like I'm talking to an elected official. And the reason I'm saying that is that you skip the fun part of the conversation. What I had said last week was that when you did the math on what the folks that subsidize your insurance premiums were, the savings you were going to yield from that subsidization all but paid for your vacation up until you broke your rib, and then that massive major deductible whooped you in the eyeball.
Yes, it did. But the good news was...
I wouldn't have had fun with it if it hadn't have been your gleeful thought that the folks subsidizing you were paying for your trip.
Well, you misunderstood the term glee. I wasn't happy about it at all, as I thought I was pretty clear. I was making fun of it, and I was saying, oh, yes, thank you, younger generation, as I just did. Thank you for going to China, borrowing money, and putting it on your own credit card. No, my point was, this is absurd that I, as a retired guy with assets, should be getting over $600 a month subsidy from the taxpayers of the United States of America. There's something wrong with that. And it's doubly wrong that I had such a big subsidy that the net difference, assuming I didn't have to have an emergency event, the net difference would have paid for my ski vacation. Yes, I was trying to explain and exaggerate the absurdity, and you missed the subtlety. No, that's a sad commentary.
It may be that I took advantage of the subtlety, but I didn't miss it. But no, I did have fun.
You didn't miss it.
And in truth, Jim, you and I agree on this, as much as I hate to say that.
Oh, my golly.
It is. The idea that we're subsidizing you or me or anybody in between us is, to me, is nauseating. And I'm wondering, I don't know anything about your income, forget your fixed assets, but whatever your income is, could you have qualified for Governor O'Snyder's Michigan Medicaid explosion?
You know, it's interesting. And my income is almost 100% Social Security. Okay, so because I'm able to adjust what I take in and out.
Sure.
And I'm getting kind of a standard Social Security that anybody who started taking their Social Security at 62 gets. You can do your math there. But I did look, because I am now finding there are all sorts of things that are being given out to folks, as we just found with Governor Snyder's expansion of Medicaid, which is different from Medicare. The Medicaid is a free health plan for those people who are viewed to be of very low income. But in Michigan, that low income rate has been adjusted to be up to 140% of what the federal poverty rate is. And for an individual, I believe that works out to be around $14,000 or $15,000 of net income. It's pretty close to what you and I would know of as adjusted gross income if you're doing your income taxes now. So you could actually make more than $14,000, $15,000 and still qualify as an individual. So, no, I did not qualify for Medicaid, and frankly, I would not want Medicaid. The problem was that I was very happy, and so many millions of people nationally, and certainly hundreds of thousands in Michigan, were very happy with their own plans. I would have loved to have kept my old plan.
You mean the one that
was
Obama deemed unworthy?
You bet. So the government stepped in, and it forced me to make a decision that ultimately turned out not to be a good decision. Again, I have no trouble making my own decisions, and let's give an example of what we just had happen over this just the last 24 hours, this big windstorm. Some people have made a decision that they were not going to have homeowners insurance for whatever reason, or at least insurance that covered tree damage. Some people decided to have very low deductibles in case a disaster happened. Some decided to have very high deductibles. These are all decisions that adults make. That makes sense to me that we should do this. Yeah. Under Obamacare, yes, they did have different choices, and they did have lower deductible plans available, but the costs were really prohibitive.
Listen, when I was mocking O'Snyder and his Medicaid explosion, did I say Medicare explosion?
No. I think you said Medicaid.
I just want to make sure if I did, I corrected myself.
It gets confusing, though, to folks.
Well,
you bet.
Yeah, not so much, but sometimes I may have misspoke. But I got to tell you, I really wasn't making fun of you last week. What I was truthfully trying to do was to point out that for all of my life, the concept of buying an insurance policy with a 4 or a 5 or some massive deductible was the insurance of last resort. That's what we used to view it as. I couldn't get any other insurance, so this is what I've gotten. And the irony in this upside down, like Animal Farm world where everything means the opposite of what it did 5 years ago, the irony to it is that becomes the insurance that the government wants you to have, and passing on the good insurance that you had. To me, it's just and a lot of folks are warm and fuzzy on this. I saw a citizen. In fact, this person was an instructor at, I can't remember, one of the local colleges, that had posted a comment on a local candidate's Facebook page that was bragging about her reduction in insurance cost and saying, well, maybe it's not so bad after all. And that's really what caused me to make the comment last week, because there's a lot of folks that are looking at this up front and going, wow, this isn't so bad. Folks, it's terrible if you actually get sick, which is the purpose of having it in the first place.
Well, yes. And of course, there are always exceptions to any rule. But the simple reality is that certainly the vast majority, I'd be willing to bet you it's probably 80 or 90% or more of the people who have taken advantage of the Obamacare insurance policies within the Obamacare exchanges in the state of Michigan chose them because of the subsidy that they received. Matter of fact, a similar plan to what I had before now has become available. Actually, it became available, I guess, in February after I made my move. when the Obama administration loosened up the rules a little bit and said that some of the old plans can continue, although my old plan had gone up by, if I was to keep it, would have gone up by $700 a year. So the point is that, yes, lots of people like free stuff. Everybody likes free stuff. And in my case, if I'd have been able to stay relatively healthy, $16.50 paid for by somebody else. Well, I liked it in one sense, but I hated the concept that millions and billions of dollars are going to be borrowed and put on the backs of the young people of this country.
Yeah, but the sick, twisted part of that entire concept that Obama has rolled out is that they're going to subsidize somebody that has a low income, and then they're going to give them a deductible that the average person flatly cannot afford.
Bingo.
So you go, wait a minute, you're going to do this to a person who's got an income process. You've got a low income. I'm going to give you an insurance policy that makes absolutely no sense for you to have.
Let me just throw some numbers at you. Let's just say I kept my old policy. My old policy with the bump up would have cost about $4,000 a year in monthly premiums. Okay, not onerous. I could have handled it. That would have been fine. But the deductible that would have been popped into that was $2,500. So think about it. Until I had $6,500 worth of medical bills, I had no insurance. And it's those that type of math that young people and smart people at any level are going to say, wait a minute, is it really worth me to pay $350, $400 a month, and I'm still not going to have any coverage until I've paid this $4,000 in annual, and then another $2,500. Yeah. And that's, too many people are going to say, no, it isn't worth it. Or they'll do something like I did, take a very, very super high deductible that they know they can't pay in order to pretend they have insurance.
The math isn't reasonable. Folks, we're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about things going on out west.
This is News Talk 1090, WKBZ.
If you ever find yourself arrested in jail and got bail, make sure you call me, Tommy D, at Bad Boys Bail Bonds, 866-728-6400. Because if I can't get you out, you ain't getting out. Hey, have you ever thought about becoming a fugitive recovery agent? And you're not certified, don't know where to turn, don't know what to do or what to expect? Log on to National Academy of Bail Enforcement.com and apply today. Classes are forming soon in Michigan. Tell them Tommy D sent you.
I've made a discovery. The down-home community our grandparents loved is still here. Seriously, that's what you'll find at Renegade River in downtown Spring Lake. You might be looking for a new or used hunting rifle or something for personal defense. Maybe a DNR sport license or fishing supplies, personal and home defense, hunting, Army, Navy supplies, fishing, survival gear, and even a tools and guy stuff consignment department. You'll be greeted by low prices and quick professional service provided by shopkeeper like Hewitt. If you're not in a hurry, grab a cup of coffee and join in the conversation. Renegade River, firearms, hunting, personal protection and survival gear, going camping, or looking for emergency products. Come take advantage of the prices while meeting up with old friends and making new ones. Renegade River, next to the police station in downtown Spring Lake, or go to the website renegaderiver.com.
The Talk of Muskegon. News Talk 1090, WKBZ.
That is hard. Welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show. I'm Mike Hewitt, and my guest today is Jim Riley. Jim, when we left off, we were getting ready to if you didn't mind, segueing out west. And before we dive right into the Bundy thing, I wanted to talk about a map I've got in my hand here. It's kind of a fascinating map. And I don't know that a lot of folks realize this, but I want to bounce around the western states for a second. The state of Washington, a little over 30% of the acreage in the state of Washington is owned by the federal government. And Oregon, 53% of its total acreage owned by the feds. Idaho, a little over 50%. California, that surprised me, a little over 45% of the entire state acreage is owned by the feds.
45% of California is owned by the federal government?
Yep.
In the form of what, primarily?
Vacant land. Well, it can be federal buildings and that kind of
state
thing.
Parks and things?
Just identified as federal property.
Oh, my golly.
Arizona, 48%. Utah, 57%. Montana, 30%. Wyoming, 42%. But specifically, we'll dive right in here to Nevada, which is where the big drama is. And folks, if you think it's over with, it's not. We're going to talk about the Bundy thing for a minute. But right now, the current federal property ownership in the great state of Nevada is 84.48% of the total state is owned by the federal government. And I'm just flabbergasted. And by the way, if you look at Michigan, almost 10% of Michigan is owned by federal in the hands of the federal government. If you look at the great states in general, great states being Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, if you want to reach, we are by far the most owned state at 9.97. And by comparison, Indiana is at 2%, Illinois is at 1.79, etc. So I don't know why the feds have such a good whiskey grip on us, but they do. But as it relates to the Nevada thing...
Now, explain a little bit the Bundy and the Nevada.
Everyone, for the folks that have been watching, or just a little, maybe you can even help me with a little bit of redraw of the picture, but Bundy was a rancher. He's been ranching. His family's been a rancher in the ranching business there since the mid-1800s, as I understand it. And specifically grazing on that land since 1870 is what I saw one of the statements from a family member suggest. It's public land. There's a dispute, by the way. If you watch Las Vegas TV, as my family does, there seems to be a dispute over who actually owns the land that's in question. Clark County seems to think that the land belongs to Clark County. Of course, the feds and the media have been treating it as federal land, and frankly, I don't know who owns it, other than to say, yes, it is public land. And, watching some of the pictures get painted, it's suggesting that, for instance, Reuters had stated that he was trying to take over public land for himself, take ownership of it, which is not what I understand the Bundy thing to be. But if for listeners, if you ever stood out in the desert in out in Nevada, and I have, in any direction, it's just flat, open desert countryside. So we're, when I listen to the Bureau of Land Management talk about how they need to have funding to help support the maintenance of it, folks, that's a lie. There's no maintenance going on of it. It's just a big, gigantic slice of open desert land. They're not supporting anything. And it started out with the turtle story, which was another bold-faced lie. And I say that because on one hand, these desert tortoises are on the protected list. On the other hand, their population is so strong that they're euthanizing them in order to keep the overall turtle population healthy. Go, wait a minute. So there's so many of these tortoises, keeping in mind the Bundy family has been there since the 1870s grazing, but there's so many of these tortoises that they were worried about that were going to be affected all of a sudden. And it comes down to money. So the more you dig, like almost every story in politics, the more you dig, it does follow the money. And all of a sudden you start running into solar/wind farms from some Chinese firm in Harry Reid's name. And you go, wait a minute. So it's not a question of whether his cattle are going to hurt the tortoises. That hasn't happened since the dawning of time. It's really a question of who gets possession of this land for their own purposes. What do you think, Jim?
Well, I think you've explained it fairly well. What's happening here initially, and it's like any type of phony baloney story that's put together by some people who don't appear to be all that bright to begin with. It unravels pretty quickly. But in a nutshell, the federal government has been fighting this family who've been, as you said, this family has been using these public lands, but it's been apparently a legal policy or process that they've been doing for these many, many decades to graze their cattle. Using the Federal Endangered Species Act and saying that, in fact, the turtles, these tortoises, have been endangered by this family, Then the federal government came in and said, we're going to move you off, move your cattle off, and not allow you any use of this land anymore. Now, that story, as you said, has unraveled. There is no problem with the tortoises, and it's gotten far more complex from there. But what is, to me, so frightening, and we've seen this isn't a Republican-Democrat issue because it's been done on both sides with both Republicans and Democrats from the federal government level and in some cases the state level. But using these environmental laws that are intended to do good things, which is to protect endangered species, but using these acts just willy-nilly, pretending that there's something happening, not providing any proof that there is, and then going in and taking private property without any legal ability to do it, and getting away with it for the most part.
You know what I find fascinating is the way the media reports it in general. Almost everything that I saw that I've read, at least from internet reports from places like Reuters, etc., where every time that they're referencing the protesters, the folks that were on the side of the Bundy family, it's far right, it's gun-toting, it's extremists. There's all of these kind of words to describe them. But then when you actually look at the pictures, it's kind of fascinating because right now I'm looking at a picture on my iPad that shows a picture of two people covered with brush or disguising themselves. They're laying flat on their bellies with long-range, heavily scoped rifles. This is the government, and they're watching the people with the protest signs. And so I pause and I try to take off and set my own ideology aside for a minute. And I look at these two images. You got a whole bunch of families, husbands, wives, mothers, grandmothers, kids, all with picket signs. They're the enemy, and the good guys are the guys that are hiding in the shrubs, wearing camouflage, with sniper rifles trained on these people that are carrying protest signs. And I say, wait a minute, who's the extremist here? The person with the sniper rifle or the person with the protest sign?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. It's a very frightening situation where normal Americans exercising their constitutional rights to protest, their constitutional rights to speak freely, and are finding that they are confronted, not by sheriffs, local sheriffs, county sheriffs, not by even enforcement from the state, but the federal government has moved in. This is the old black helicopters kind of thing, because in fact they are loaded with helicopters. They're loaded with the black SUVs, the white SUVs out there now in there, and they're even more frighteningly loaded with trained snipers aimed at individuals. There's been no suggestion of any fight in here. This is people trying to protest, and yet this is how our federal government, and they wouldn't do a thing if the President of the United States and the top people within that administration didn't allow it. They're aiming guns at regular Americans.
Now, I got to tell you, and you said something a minute ago about this isn't a Democrat or Republican thing. So, folks, if you're listening and you're progressive, you're liberal, you're conservative, I don't care what you are, get on the internet, Google First Amendment area, put it in parentheses or put it in quotes. So, First Amendment area, and then Google image search it. And you won't find just the sign that we've heard a lot about out of the Bundy Ranch. You're going to find that sign and signs like it all over America. And I find that, folks, fearsome. Being a fellow that likes to talk on the air and exercise my First Amendment, the idea that the federal government can establish a First Amendment zone, corral it off with a fence and say, if you have a First Amendment announcement you'd like to make, go stand inside that cyclone fence area.
What a concept.
I got to tell you, can you imagine Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and Hancock and company standing inside a cyclone fence to announce their opposition to tyranny? I just find that so insulting. That, and of course, this one of the revelations from the Bundy drama that's unfolded is that sign. But when you Google it, folks, I found one in Ohio. I found one in Michigan. I found one in Connecticut. I found one in Florida. They're in California. I cannot find a state that doesn't have some area that's described as with a sign posted that says your First Amendment area.
Well, you like to talk about Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States. Well, today is his birthday.
Happy birthday.
And he has a phrase, a quote that I find really is appropriate for this. And the quote is quite simply this: most bad government has grown out of too much government. And here we have an entire situation that ostensibly, now keep in mind here, the federal government has said, we did this. We've decided to step into this man's livelihood. We brought all these shooters. We brought all these helicopters and all of these SUVs, and for all I know, there's armored vehicles there because we want to protect some turtles. That's the reason. It's under the guise of the too much government. That they're doing what they're doing.
But when you look at too much government, first off, I absolutely agree with that. But here's the fascinating thing about too much government. Normally, President Obama offers an opinion or a quip on almost everything that possibly is in the news. He's got a reeling opinion on it. And usually Senator Reid is down in the well of the Senate babbling on about some Republican that he hates and using all kinds of evil words.
And he's the senator from this state.
He's the senator from the state. Now, let me make 2 points here. The first is the reason he does that, the reason he makes those quips from the Senate floor is because he can't be sued when he's in that floor. If he were standing out on Main Street in downtown Las Vegas and said those things, he could get civilly sued.
Oh, that's interesting.
But he's protected when he's on the floor of the Senate babbling. That's why he makes those outrageous statements there. But that aside, you've got 1,000 people picketing, and you've got armed militarized police, federal police, aimed at them. You've got helicopters flying all over the top in an FAA no-fly zone, and neither the senator from the state nor the president of the United States acknowledge it's happening at all. I find that their silence is deafening.
Well, if they win here, and I'm very fearful that they will, but if they win here, they will take it to the next step. Every piece of odious over government outrage has come not from being a wonderful, caring, enlightened government to a Nazi regime. It's come with baby steps, very small steps taken to see how far you can go. And you need only to just read a little bit about how the Nazi Germany got to the disaster it became in the 30s and 40s to get a sense of how it works. But we have a situation here, and I'm just looking back at this Bundy family. They did own all of this land up until 1993, when the land that they owned was reclassified, not taken over. That's a harmful, hurtful word. Just simply reclassified, a baby step to reclassify it as federal property in order to protect the rare desert tortoise. That's what the government has claimed. And again, if they are able to succeed here, the federal government, and they are able to take these people, probably throw them in jail, and then reclassify or come up with some other terminology that no one really understands what it means, take this land, does anybody believe that they'll stop there?
Now, here's the part of that, the other hitch in that get-along, is that when they reclassified it, that's when they came up with the $1.83 per head of cattle that Bundy was supposed to pay. But what the news doesn't report is that was supposed to be a maintenance fee, and the Bureau of Land Management were going to charge the Bundy that fee. He started paying it. But what he was going to get out of it, okay, you've reclassified my land, you've stepped in, and now you're going to manage my herd, and you're going to charge me for that service. But then his herd started dying because they weren't properly managing it. I know it's shocking to think that the government didn't properly manage something, but that's why he said, I'm not paying you, you're killing off my cattle.
And what that really was, what you're talking about, is a contract. In other words, the federal government came in and said, okay, we're taking something away from you, but to keep you quiet, to make you feel good, we are going to engage in a contract with you. You are going to pay something. We are going to provide something. And Bundy alleges, and apparently there's ample evidence to provide that this is true, that the federal government has reneged and did not deliver on its half of the contract.
They absolutely didn't. Listen, we're going to go to a break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about a lady who had her federal refund snagged so that a family debt from 1960 could get paid. We'll be back, folks.
I've made a discovery. The down-home community our grandparents loved is still here. Seriously, that's what you'll find at Renegade River in downtown Spring Lake. You might be looking for a new or used hunting rifle or something for personal defense. Maybe a DNR sport license or fishing supplies, personal and home defense, hunting, Army, Navy supplies, fishing, survival gear, and even a tools and guy stuff consignment department. You'll be greeted by low prices and quick professional service provided by shopkeeper like Hewitt. If you're not in a hurry, grab a cup of coffee and join in the conversation. Renegade River, firearms, hunting, personal protection and survival gear, going camping, or looking for emergency products. Come take advantage of the prices while meeting up with old friends and making new ones. Renegade River, next to the police station in downtown Spring Lake, or go to the website renegaderiver.com.
Hi, if you ever find yourself arrested, in jail, and got bail, make sure you call me, Tommy D, at Bad Boys Bail Bonds, 866-728-6400. Because if I can't get you out, you ain't getting out. Hey, have you ever thought about becoming a fugitive recovery agent? And you're not certified, don't know where to turn, don't know what to do or what to expect? Log on to National Academy of Bail Enforcement.com and apply today. Classes are forming soon in Michigan. Tell them Tommy D sent you.
Welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show. You are inside the First Amendment zone.
That's right. It ought to be everywhere. Apparently, just when the federal government gets involved, they determine that First Amendment zones are only in places that they deem allowable.
Yeah, it's you know, I wrote, these are fast-moving federal footprints in a very dangerous direction, and they're telegraphing that they can establish such a privilege whenever and wherever they wish, or not.
That's the issue. Once we get comfortable with the concept that the federal or state government can determine where the First Amendment zone is, then what a shock. That First Amendment zone will start to shrink like you cannot believe.
There's a lady named Mary Grice. I hope I'm saying her name right. Mary Grice actually works for the federal government. And I think she works for the Food and Drug Administration. She's just an administrative person, not a just an employee with the feds. When her, I think it was her father or grandfather, I can't recall, doesn't matter to the story. A fella died in 1960, and in 1960, Mary Grice was 5 years old. And at the time of the person's death, the family in total was paid an extra $4,500 beyond what they should have received from the Social Security Administration. So we're talking roughly 54 years ago. And that monies was just seized from Mary Grice's tax refund. That's probably equally a slippery slope as to the first seizing of our First Amendment. Now we've got an IRS that can look back decades over the course of an entire lifetime and steal somebody's money for a debt that one of their family members owed. And I have to tell you, Jim Riley, to me, it goes beyond Mary Grice and her misfortune of having an entanglement with the federal government. What it does is it points to a federal government that's testing to see exactly how far they can reach. And this is too doggone far.
I couldn't agree with you more. There's a couple of points here that need to be clarified. One is that where you said that the family had received extra money, this is the allegation that the federal government is using to come after the family today. There's been no proof of that, and there's also been no proof that there's any law that can allow any organization, be it government or private, to go after the private property of people who are not those who are accused of getting the wronged property to begin with. So in other words, much like the saving of the turtles has morphed into bringing in an armed camp in a family's ranch in Nevada, this woman who is now having her money, actually the money's gone. She now is in a fight to get it back. But the federal government just essentially said, hey, we made a mistake. We gave somebody some extra money, and we're going to take it back from you. That's an illegal event, but it's almost impossible for an individual, and she is a simple individual, to fight the federal government. The question, as you just said, they're not interested in the less than $10,000. They're interested in finding out how far they can go.
A government that would give billions of dollars to a country that hates us, hoping to buy an opportunity for our president to have a photo op, doesn't care about $4,500 from the guy's name was Scott Grace, and it was her father, and he died in 1960. And the government relies on, and I'm quoting now from CBS News, this tracking of old debt stems from an obscure change in the 2008 Farm Bill that allows the government for the first time to seize debt more than 10 years old. So evidently the 10-year statute was removed, and in place of it, there was no limitation whatsoever.
But that statute still requires that you must, if you're going to get assets from someone, you cannot willy-nilly get them from someone else. You must go after the person who's died. As it turned out, in this instance, I believe there were 4 children, and I also believe that those 4 children, whatever assets were remaining from this gentleman's estate, were split about 4 ways. So, again, this is an illegal, no matter how you cut it, it's an illegal
seizure.
It's an illegal seizure. The concept of what they're doing is illegal. But what's, to me, most exciting, and I'd forgotten about this point, this little piece was thrown in one of these omnibus bills, in this case a farm bill, that I'm sure a significant number of Republicans signed on to. We've got to stop these omnibus bills, these bills that have 2,000 pages that are supposedly addressing one small issue.
So here's the deal. When you look at Mary Grace, we have this little thing that nobody pays attention anymore to called the United States Constitution. And in it is Article 4, which talks about search and seizure. Mary didn't have due process. There was no notification. They just took her dough. Period. They literally just took her dough for a debt that belonged to whomever. She was 5 at the time. We can't possibly assume that she was responsible and came up with some ill-gotten booty as a result of her father dying when she was 5 years old.
Well, exactly. The argument from the feds, from what I've read, is that the money, some small amount of thousands of dollars, apparently was never spent. Or at least there was enough money left after the gentleman had passed away, so that the estate had that money and it could have been taken back by the federal government. But the law at the time, which said that there was a 10-year time frame that the getting the money back had to happen in, that had passed. Now retroactively, the federal government, somebody slides this in the dark of night, perhaps. But matter of fact, the more I think about it, I believe that our representative Bill Huizenga did vote for the farm bill. Is this the one, the more recent one?
He wasn't. No, he wasn't in.
What year was it?
2009, I think that this article I had in front of me said he wasn't in office.
Well, it would have been either he or Huizenga. So in other words, good, strong, solid conservative Republican.
Assuming Hoekstra voted for it, I don't have a clue how he voted, but
Hoekstra or Huizenga.
It would have been during Hoekstra's term.
But the point is that again, sliding these things in retroactively. Let's just say in real life that she did own the money, but she knew, okay, well, the law is the law, and they can't take the money from me now for whatever reason. The federal government didn't go after it, or maybe they didn't have a case, but for whatever reason, let's just say that her eyes were open, and she said, okay, well, good, now the money's ours, so let's go spend it.
Here's the problem. To me, I'm one of those guys that the establishment looks at, you're a right-wing extremist, because to me, these things are just a matter of fact. You can't legislate a law that supersedes, and I'm reading the text, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. It doesn't offer, the only ambiguity here that lawyers and point heads take advantage of is unreasonable. So some moron in the federal government thinks it's reasonable to take some lady's dough for a debt that her family incurred when she was 5. But for Hoekstra or anyone to think that they can cause a legislative act to change the Fourth Amendment is it's just not possible. Obviously, it is, but
until this goes to the Supreme Court, or at least some level of courts to be overturned or at least clarified, it is the law of the land.
Unless they're too busy working on some other nonsensical to hear it.
Well, maybe going after save turtles. But the point is that this is the law of the land, and so the federal government at this point in time is not violating the law of the land. And this was the same argument that was used by Adolf Hitler and the National Socialist Party, the Nazis, when they were doing their takeovers. They were not violating any laws. They just changed the laws so that what they were doing, that their actions were in total compliance with the laws of the day.
The only good thing about the Bundy thing is that what I think I may have said earlier, the most important lesson we can take is that resistance is not futile. I don't know how the Bundy thing is going to end up. If folks think it's over with, they're wrong. But one thing is for certain, 1,000 people out there in the media covering it saying the government is overreached stopped the government from the path that they were on. And I say that because the government can be stopped. But folks need to wake up, pay attention, and get involved.
Well, every one of these points, we've talked about 3 issues today. Every one of these was baby steps, so maybe an overstep, certainly in the Bundy case, but because now the federal government has been exposed. But they're baby steps to see how far government can go. And each little step that they take is basically the basis that they use going forward for the next step. And I want to just give a quote of H.L. Mencken, who's an author and a philosopher of sorts. A wonderful quote of his. It says, quote, "The urge to save humanity is almost always a false front for the urge to rule." And we know that. In other words, we're going to do this for your betterment. That's what Obamacare is all about. We certainly know this situation in Nevada is the exact same thing. We are righting a wrong because these evil people are killing tortoises. And so the federal government has got to step in.
It is the exact same thing as the Medicaid explosion. Yep. It's the same thing as Common Core. It's the same thing.
Common Core, perfect.
It's the same thing as students or teachers rather and parents must be so stupid that they can't make a decision with their own third grader. So we're going to legislate this to make sure that the right decision is made because you're just not capable, parents. And I'm telling you, every one of these things, they're not baby steps, folks. These are mountain steps. They're big steps over the top of your freedom. And I don't care if you're left or right ideologically, you got to slow down and take a look at what's going on around you because changes are happening.
And elections are coming up. You better remember it.
Now, recently, several months ago, we had talking about primaries. Jim, you don't mind primary challengers, do you?
I do not. I believe that's brings the strength into any party.
I got to tell you, I think, and I said this last week, I think that primary challenging is how we make sure that the Republican Party is healthy. If I were a Democrat, I would take the exact same position about that party. I wished we had many viable parties. We don't. We have 2. And so if we're stuck with 2 viable parties and that's it or that's that, the only way to make that system work is to get engaged in the primary and make sure that right ideas are advanced. And so that in the arena of ideas, that's not to be confused with the First Amendment arena, it's the arena of ideas where hopefully the best percolate to the top. That's where primaries have got to get involved, folks. Get involved.
Well, you have the most power, too. You have 10 times the normal vote in a primary. As a rule. So
if you've got someone that really, really thinks of themselves as a moderate, bless them, that's okay. But don't let people whisper in your ear and say, oh, no, we can't have that. The establishment won't like that. Who cares? It's better for America. Am I thinking wrong here?
I'm thinking you're 100% right, which means that you probably are wrong. But
oh, that's so scary. Oscar, you better correct us, get us back on path. It's terrible when Jim and I get together, you know that. He's going, well, yeah, of course, that's the way it was. So, Jim, I've been happy to have you back on today. It's been
a lot of fun.
5-6 months or so. Don't let it go that long again.
Well, I've been gone a long time, so it's lovely
vacation.
To be back.
Coming
to be
home
back.
Must have been like being on vacation.
You know, I saw your comment on Facebook, and you were 100% right.
Yeah,
it was like
around the house like, wow, it's kind of nice in here.
I don't have to get up and go running off for this, that, or whatever.
You got a lot of damage at your house from yesterday's windstorm?
Yes, 2 big trees down.
106,000 people in Michigan without power, and I understand consumers are saying somewhere in the middle of Monday. before most of it's restored. Even here at the station, we're on a generator.
Yes, and I'm going to get a generator for my own home sometime soon.
Yeah, you know what? I had one, and I'm going to have to get it restarted. Folks, I'm hearing music, so we're all done. We will talk to you next week. Have a great and safe week.
Brought to you by Renegade River.
Hi, if you ever find yourself arrested, in jail, and got bail, make sure you call me, Tommy D, at Bad Boys Bail Bonds, 866-728-6400. Because if I can't get you out, you ain't getting out. Hey, have you ever thought about becoming a fugitive recovery agent? And you're not certified, don't know where to turn, don't know what to do or what to expect? Log on to National Academy of Bail Enforcement.com and apply today. Classes are forming soon in Michigan. Tell them Tommy D sent you.
I've made a discovery. The down-home community our grandparents loved is still here. Seriously, that's what you'll find at Renegade River in downtown Spring Lake. You might be looking for a new or used hunting rifle or something for personal defense. Maybe a DNR sport license or fishing supplies. Personal and home defense. Hunting, Army, Navy supplies, fishing, survival gear, and even a tools and guy stuff consignment department. You'll be greeted by low prices and quick professional service provided by shopkeeper like Hewitt. If you're not in a hurry, grab a cup of coffee and join in the conversation. Renegade River, firearms, hunting, personal protection and survival gear, going camping, or looking for emergency products. Come take advantage of the prices while meeting up with old friends and making new ones. Renegade River, next to the police station in downtown Spring Lake, or go to the website renegaderiver.com.